She had backed herself flat against the cold glass of the floor-to-ceiling window before she even registered moving. Roman Cassidy's hand was already halfway toward her face, and every nerve in her body was doing what it had learned to do in the stairwell of the parking garage 2 days ago. Don't. The word came out barely above a breath, not loud enough to be a command, barely loud enough to be a plea. Roman stopped. He was not a man who stopped for much. In 8 years of building Hargrove Biocapital from a mid-sized pharmaceutical firm into a $3.4 billion enterprise, he had learned to read rooms the way other people read weather. He read the stillness in Nell Vargas now, the particular stillness of someone who had learned to hold very still so it would stop hurting, and his gaze dropped from her face to the collar of her blouse, where the fabric had shifted just enough to expose the edge of something dark and wrong against the pale skin of her shoulder. Purple shaped exactly like a hand. The temperature in the room seemed to fall 10 degrees. When Roman finally spoke, his voice had gone somewhere very quiet, somewhere the rest of the 43rd floor would never hear from him. "Tell me who put those marks on you, Nell." Nell Vargas had spent most of her 28 years becoming exceptionally good at being overlooked. She was not the kind of woman who walked into a room and pulled focus. She was the kind of woman who sat in the back corner of a conference room and calculated exactly how many ways the quarterly projections were wrong while everyone else stared at the wrong slides. She was round and soft in a world that preferred angles. She wore her dark hair in a bun that was neither stylish nor intentionally unstylish, just practical, and she bought her blazers 2 sizes up so they skimmed rather than clung. And she had understood from a young age that the best thing about being invisible was that nobody bothered you much. Hargrove Biocapital's Chicago headquarters suited her perfectly. The firm occupied the top 6 floors of a glass tower on Michigan Avenue, all exposed concrete and recessed lighting, and the particular architectural quiet that comes with serious money. Nell worked in financial compliance on the 38th floor, in a corner cubicle wedged between the copy room and a fire door. She had a second monitor, a noise-cancelling headset she wore even when nothing was playing, and a reputation among the senior analysts for being unnervingly accurate. She liked it there. Being accurate was safe. Being accurate meant no one had reason to look too closely. Numbers, Nell had always believed, were the most honest things in the world. Which was exactly why, on a grey Wednesday in October with Lake Michigan hammering restless waves against the shoreline outside, she could not look away from what she was seeing. She had been running a routine internal reconciliation on the European clinical trial accounts, the kind of audit that took most analysts 4 days and that she'd learned to finish in 2. When the pattern surfaced, it wasn't obvious. Whoever had built it knew exactly what they were doing. But across 11 separate subsidiary accounts, routed through a Zurich-based intermediary called Verdant Holdings GmbH, someone had been siphoning money in increments small enough to avoid automated flags. $500,000 there. Timed to coincide with legitimate wire transfers so the timestamps lined up cleanly. She ran the calculation twice. 5.9 million gone. Her hands were absolutely steady on the keyboard. That was how she knew she was frightened. She went very still when she was frightened. She pulled the reconciliation files onto an encrypted thumb drive. The protocol was clear. Anomalies above the $100,000 threshold went directly to the chief financial officer. She needed to take this to Bryce Alderman. She found him in the stairwell between 38 and 39, finishing a phone call. She waited until he'd hung up. She held the thumb drive in one hand and the printed summary she'd prepared in the other, and she told him, clearly and precisely, what she had found. Bryce Alderman had the kind of face that reliably wore the right expression for every moment. Sympathetic in one-on-ones, decisive in presentations, collegial in the hallways. The expression that moved across it now was not any of those things. It raw and ugly and very fast. "How many people have you shown this to?" he said. "No one yet," Nell said. "You're my direct report for." He moved before she finished the sentence. His hand locked around her upper arm like a vise, and he shoved her backward into the concrete wall of the stairwell. The impact punched the air from her lungs in one sharp burst. The printed summary scattered across the landing. His face was very close to hers, and his voice was very low, bitten off word by word, the kind of low that was worse than shouting. "You are going to delete those files. You are going to wipe that drive, and you are going to go back to your desk and forget you ever ran that audit. And if I hear your name attached to this, if you go to anyone at all, I will make you disappear so quietly that your own family won't know what question to ask. Do you understand me?" He released her arm with a shove that spun her sideways into the metal railing. She caught herself with both hands. The bruising was already starting, deep and hot. She was shaking in a way she couldn't stop. Bryce picked up the printed summary, folded it once, and walked up the stairs without looking back. Nell went home. She sat in her apartment in Lincoln Square, a one-bedroom with a slanted kitchen floor and a radiator that clanged all winter, and she put a bag of frozen peas against her arm, and she did not cry. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror, at the bruising already going dark against her skin, and she thought about quitting, about writing the resignation letter that night, about leaving the thumb drive on her desk in the morning, and walking away from Hargrove Biocapital, and finding some small firm in Andersonville where the biggest scandal was someone expensing a personal dinner. She thought about it for a long time. Then she thought about $5.9 million, and she thought about who it belonged to. She went to bed without deciding anything. Morning decided for her. At 8:47 a.m., before she had opened her software or touched her second cup of coffee, two men in charcoal suits appeared at her cubicle. They had the look of men whose suits were not a wardrobe choice so much as a uniform. The taller one spoke. "Mr. Cassidy would like to see you." She had never been summoned to the 43rd floor. In 3 years at Hargrove, she had seen Roman Cassidy in person exactly twice. Once at the January all-hands meeting, where he spoke for 9 minutes about Q4 performance, and once in an elevator, where he had said nothing, and she had watched the floor numbers until she reached hers. She knew him primarily as a signature on company-wide emails and a photograph on the investor relations page, dark hair going silver at the temples, eyes a flat and unreadable gray, jaw like something a sculptor had thought carefully about. The 43rd floor felt different from the rest of the building. The air felt different. His office occupied the northeast corner, glass on 2 sides, the city and the lake stretching out beyond it, and Roman Cassidy was watching her walk in from behind a desk made from a single slab of dark walnut. "Sit down, Nell," he said. She sat. He was larger than she remembered. The photographs didn't capture the particular way he occupied space, the stillness of a man who understood that stillness was itself a form of authority. No tie. Sleeves rolled to the elbow, a faint scar along his left forearm that no company photograph had ever caught. "My systems flagged an encrypted file transfer from your workstation yesterday afternoon," Roman said without preamble. "Compliance reconciliation. Verdant Holdings, $5.9 million. Nell said nothing. "You found it," he said, "and you didn't bring it to me. Why?" "I brought it to my direct report," Nell said carefully. "Bryce Alderman." The quality of the silence changed. Roman rose from behind the desk without hurry and walked around it, the way that a certain kind of man moves through rooms he owns entirely, and as he crossed toward her, Nell felt the old reflex fire before she could stop it. She was already pressed against the window glass before she registered moving. His hand, which had been reaching toward her chin, intending only to tilt her face up so she would meet his eyes instead of the floor, froze in midair. And in the shift of her movement, her collar had slipped. The silence that followed was not an absence of sound so much as a very specific texture of it. She closed her eyes. The fear radiating off Roman Cassidy was a different shape than Bryce Alderman's fear. Bryce's fear had been ugly and cornered. This, the cold, deliberate quiet coming off Roman right now, she understood instinctively was not aimed at her. "Bryce," she said. Her voice broke somewhere in the middle of the word. "In the stairwell. He threatened to. He told me to delete everything, and he said if I went to anyone, he'd make me disappear." Roman turned his head. "Dawson," he said the name without raising his voice. The man by the door moved immediately. "Find Alderman. I don't care what he's doing. I don't care who he's with. Put him in the car." The man was gone. Roman crouched down so he was at her eye level, so his frame was not above her, not looming, and she noticed the deliberateness of it, the care in it. "Do you have the drive?" he said. She reached into her bag with hands that weren't quite steady and set the thumb drive into his open palm. "You did exactly right," he said quietly. "But you can't stay here. If Alderman is moving $5.9 million through Verdant Holdings, he isn't acting alone. The people behind him will already know your name." Before she could argue, before she could point out that she had a 10 a.m. call, and a dry cleaning pickup and a life that did not accommodate being swept into whatever this was, Nell found herself in a private elevator, moving down, and then in the back seat of a black SUV with Roman Cassidy 3 feet away from her, radiating a focused quiet she could not quite account for. The apartment on Lakeshore Drive was not on any listing. The building had no signage in the lobby, no directory on the wall. The elevator opened directly into a living space that Nell would later describe to no one because she had no one she could describe it to. Floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking Lake Michigan, the water gray and restless in the October afternoon, a long sectional sofa in deep charcoal, warm light that came from everywhere and cast shadows nowhere, the kind of interior that understood the word restraint without reaching for it. "My private residence," Roman said, setting his jacket over a chair back. "4 people know this address. You're the 4th. Nell stood at the edge of the living room and felt with crystalline clarity how mismatched she was from it. Her slacks were loose at the hem. Her blouse was tucked in unevenly because she'd been rushing that morning. Her flats had a scuff on the right toe she'd been meaning to fix for weeks. She pulled her cardigan tighter and did not look at her own reflection in the dark glass of the windows. Roman returned carrying a medical kit. He sat at the far end of the sofa, a deliberate distance away, and opened the kit on the cushion beside him. He looked at her arm, still wrapped in the cardigan. "May I?" he said. She hesitated. Then she let the cardigan slide off her shoulders. She heard his sharp breath. He had seen worse than a bruise. She could tell that much about him, but the sound that came from him was not clinical. His jaw tightened. With a lightness of touch that seemed impossible in hands that large, he began working arnica gel into the bruising along her upper arm. Featherlight, steady, as if her skin were something worth being careful with. It was the opposite of everything Bryce Alderman's hands had done. "I almost didn't come in this morning," Nell said quietly. She was looking at the space between them. "I almost just quit, left the drive on the desk and disappeared." She paused. "I'm not usually someone who gets tangled up in things like this. I catch spreadsheet errors. I go home at 6:15. I don't cause problems." Roman paused. He looked at her. Not the way Bryce had looked at her. Not the way most people looked at her, which was a way of looking that managed without words to communicate that she was not quite the shape the room expected. He looked at her the way you look at something when you are actually trying to see it. "You caught a $5.9 million siphon that 11 other analysts missed," he said. "You documented it and reported it through proper channels, even knowing you were walking toward the man doing the stealing. And then you walked into this building this morning when a rational person would have been on a bus to their parents' house." He capped the tube. "You cause exactly the right kind of problems, Nell." The silence between them after that was warmer, more uncertain. His phone broke it, encrypted 2 short pulses. He answered, listened, said only, "Keep him there," and hung up. "Lock the door after me," he said, standing. "Don't open it for anyone unless it's me or Dawson. I'll be back." He was gone 4 hours. When the elevator opened again, it was past 10 at night. Roman looked the way a man looks when he has done something that cost him something. Not regret, exactly, but weight. His collar was open, his sleeves pushed back. There were dark spots on his right cuff that Nell did not look at for long. He poured 2 fingers of bourbon without being asked, and then sat in the chair across from her, forearms on his knees, and looked at her steadily. "Alderman talked," he said. "Where did the money go?" Nell said. "Shell company. Cayman Islands. Wrapped inside a Luxembourg holding structure with 11 layers of corporate registration designed to take a decade to unwind." He paused. "The beneficial owner of the Luxembourg entity is my cousin, Victor Stahl." Nell set down her tea. Victor Stahl's name wasn't on the Hargrove website, but anyone who had worked long enough in Chicago's financial sector knew it the way they knew about certain buildings and certain quiet arrangements. Not from anything written down, but from the specific silence that fell when the name came up. Victor was Roman's cousin, pushed out of the family's business 7 years ago under circumstances no one discussed openly. He had not taken it quietly. "Alderman sent him a message," Roman said, "before he went to the stairwell, before he touched you. Victor knows what you found, he knows your name." His voice dropped to something very flat and very deliberate. "He's already put a price on you, 2 million, to make this clean." The number sat in the quiet room like something physical. "But he's going to have to come through me to collect it," Roman said. For 2 days, the Lakeshore Drive apartment transformed into something that resembled a war room. Men Nell had never seen moved through the foyer at odd hours. Dawson, scarred and watchful, ran operations from the dining table. A tech specialist named Zane set up servers in the study that hummed continuously. Roman brought her clothing, cashmere, silk, soft fabrics that did not compress or hide, things that simply fit and moved when she moved. She was intensely aware of wearing them, aware of the way Roman's gaze tracked her when he thought she wasn't looking. On the second afternoon, she asked Zane to show her the encrypted ledger pulled from Verdant's servers. "I can crack the encryption," Zane said. "I can't make sense of what's inside." Nell sat down. For the next 6 hours, she did not move. She worked the way she always worked when the numbers were talking to her, settled, distraction-free, her whole nervous system quieting down to the clean frequency of pattern recognition. The ledger was built to confuse, which meant it had been built by someone who understood confusion, but not, she suspected, true elegance. There were redundant layers. Too much ornamentation, hiding too little actual complexity. She found the architecture underneath and began to map it. Roman stood at the back of the study with his arms crossed and watched her. He watched the way her fingers moved across the keyboard, quick and certain. He watched the small line that appeared between her brows when she hit a complication, and the way her shoulders dropped, almost imperceptibly, when she pushed through it. He could not look away from her. She was extraordinary. He had understood it from the audit flag on his system 2 days ago. He understood it differently now, watching the mechanism of her mind work under pressure. Unhurried, unstoppable, the lamplight warm across her face. "I have it," Nell said at nearly midnight. Roman moved to her side. He leaned over her shoulder, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "Victor isn't just hiding the money," Nell said, tracing the pathway on the screen. "He's laundering it through a legitimate asset. A mixed-use development project in River North Commercial Tower, named investor, is a private equity firm registered in Geneva. The private equity firm is a ghost. The tower is real and already under construction. The money flows from the Caymans to Luxembourg, Luxembourg to Geneva, Geneva into the River North project. Once it's in the building, its architecture, it's clean." She pulled up the final column. "But this routing code, right here, links the Geneva entity back to the Cayman account in a way that cannot survive federal subpoena. Hand this to the FBI Financial Crimes Division, and Victor's entire asset structure freezes inside 72 hours. Dawson, from the doorway, let out a slow exhale. She'd just found the kill switch to the whole operation. Roman was very close. She could smell cedar and something cooler, like lake air in winter. Against the curve of her ear, quiet enough that only she could hear, he said, "You are something else entirely, Nell Vargas." Then every light in the apartment went out. All of them, simultaneously. The servers stopped, the refrigerator, the air system. Every sound in the apartment ceased, leaving a silence that was wrong in the specific way that the absence of electricity is wrong. "MP," Zane said sharply from the dark, "someone fried the grid. The electronic locks on the elevator shaft are dead." Roman moved before the last word was finished. He pulled Nell out of her chair and behind him in a single motion. One arm, no hesitation, just as a sound came from the elevator shaft. Not mechanical. The private elevator doors, forced open from the outside, shrieked against their track guides. Dawson, take her now. The apartment came apart. She would remember it in pieces afterward. The pop of suppressed gunfire in the dark. The acrid smell of smoke, Dawson's hand on her arm, half carrying her down the hallway, the cold hardwood under her bare feet. She looked back once and saw Roman step into the foyer with a gun she hadn't known he was carrying, moving with a precision that had nothing to do with boardrooms, deliberate and dangerous and completely unsurprised by any of it. Dawson was pushing her toward the far end of the hallway, toward a reinforced door built into the wall behind the bookcase, when a shape stepped out of the guest room doorway directly to his left. A man in dark tactical gear, weapon already raised. Nell saw it before Dawson did. She did not think. She moved, throwing her full weight sideways into the man's midsection, the way a person acts when the mind has no time to insert itself between instinct and action. The impact knocked him off balance. The weapon discharged into the ceiling. The man's elbow swung back and caught the side of her face with enough force to drop her. She hit the floor hard. The world smeared sideways and went very bright. She heard one shot, then silence. Then Nell. Roman's footsteps running. She was aware of hands on her face, moving very carefully, checking the side of her head where it had connected with the floor. She was aware of being gathered up against something solid and warm, and of not wanting to be anywhere else. "I'm okay," she said into the fabric of his shirt. I have a very hard head. My mother always said that about me." The breath that moved through Roman was long and not entirely steady. His arms tightened once and held. "You absolute terror of a woman," he said very quietly into her hair. "Apartment's clear," Dawson from the hallway, "but we have about 3 minutes before the first units respond. We need to move." They went down a service stairwell to the underground garage and were in an armored SUV and moving through the city before Nell fully understood that they had left. Dawson drove. Roman sat beside her, and she leaned against his arm without making a decision about it, and he did not shift away. The safe house was in Bridgeport, a building that looked from the outside like a closed warehouse, and was on the inside, a spare and functional space with reinforced doors and a cot, and a single standing lamp. Roman set her down on the edge of the cot. He opened a first aid kit and knelt in front of her, and used a clean cloth to carefully wipe dried blood from her split lip, where the mercenary's elbow had caught her. She watched him do it. "You could have told me," she said, "when I first sat down in your office, that this was bigger than a compliance issue." "You already knew it was bigger than a compliance issue," he said. "You brought the drive anyway." "I was being professional." "You were being brave." He looked up at her. His eyes, she had noticed, were not flat grey the way the photographs suggested. There was something in them right now that was not flat at all. "There's a difference. I've been around people who do brave things for wrong reasons. Leverage, money, position. You went to Alderman because it was right. You brought me the drive because it was right. You threw yourself into that hallway because Dawson was about to take a bullet, and you couldn't stand to let that happen." She said nothing. He set the cloth aside and cupped her face in both his hands, careful around the swelling, tilting it so she had to look at him directly. "I need you to hear something," he said. "Okay," she said. "People have looked at you your whole life," Roman said, "and they have not seen what I see. Not your mind, though your mind is extraordinary. I mean you. All of you. You are not something to be minimized or hidden or made convenient for other people's comfort. You are exactly what you were always supposed to be." A muscle moved in his jaw. "Anyone who made you feel otherwise was wrong. Flatly and completely wrong." The lamp threw warm, still light across the room. Something in Nell's chest, which had been held tightly for a very long time, began carefully to loosen. "I don't know how to exist in your world," she said. "My world," Roman said quietly, "is currently reorganizing itself around you." He kissed her then, slow and certain, his hand steady, no urgency in it, no desperation, just the particular deliberateness of two people who have survived something together and understand precisely what that means. When he pulled back, his expression had settled into something she hadn't seen on it before. Not the cold authority of the 43rd floor, not the lethality of the dark hallway. Something quieter, something that looked, against all odds, like relief. "Tomorrow," Roman said, "those routing codes go to my contact at the FBI field office on Roosevelt. Victor's accounts get frozen, the River North project gets seized, and then I'm going to spend a considerable amount of time making sure my cousin understands the exact cost of putting your name in his mouth." Nell exhaled slowly. "And Bryce Alderman?" "Bryce Alderman," Roman said, "is already having the worst week of his life." She almost smiled. It almost reached the swollen side of her face, and she winced, and Roman's expression shifted with a precision she found she did not mind at all. She had come to work 48 hours ago to catch what she thought was a clerical error. She had instead unraveled a 9-figure criminal network, survived 2 acts of violence, decoded a money laundering operation built by people who understood money very well, and elegance not at all, and somehow ended up in a safe house in Bridgeport, with the man she had previously known only as a signature on a company-wide email. She was not invisible anymore. She was starting to understand, actually been invisible. She had simply been in rooms that weren't large enough to see her. Victor Stahl didn't know yet what was coming. But Nell Vargas had his kill switch, and Roman Cassidy was already planning the war.